Welcome to episode 4 of the Learn with Bruce and Eddie podcast. My name is Bruce and we're here with Eddie.
Hey guys.
And we are so welcome if you're new. If you've been with us before, welcome back. In previous episodes, we've kind of covered like who we are, a little bit about our backgrounds. So if you're interested in that, go back and listen to that. We've also managed to cover strength training and also cardio. So go back and check those episodes if you're interested. Go and check out the strength training episode in particular. That's where Eddie refers to satisfying his missus as an experience, which I think is code for an orgasm. So as you can tell, this podcast is supposed to be relaxed. It's supposed to just be basically us. You know, we don't necessarily think that we have any particular necessary authority, although I think, you know, we're very experienced in certain areas. By way of a background, my name is Bruce. I am a transformation coach. I help people make breakthroughs in their health and fitness so they can thrive. And my background, you know, I've had issues with drugs, you know, I was overweight. So I've kind of got into a lot of these things just from a place of, you know, kind of just wanting to kind of explore and learn about them. And I want to share my experience today with people who maybe, you know, just want to find out a little bit of information about these topics from just two geezers who are just kind of like talking about it in a relaxed manner. Eddie, you want to give yourself a little intro?
Yeah, similar to Bruce, I work in the coaching world as well, using movement as a medium to help people move better, to feel better, and then ultimately to think better. So we're in this sort of transformational world together. I think that's why we've joined up to offer our experiences and our knowledge to the wider community and hopefully have a bit of a laugh while we do it.
Yeah, that's it. So, you know, whether you're having a run or you're driving, you know, hopefully this is like a good way to kind of digest and kind of upload some information. So we're going to cover today in episode 4, yoga, this thing that, you know, is kind of quite buzzy. Some people are doing it on the regular, other people aren't. Other people are really scared of it. I know I was really scared of it. But I think, you know, a lot of people now in the Western world suddenly recognizing that there's this thing out there called yoga and they should be doing it, but they don't know why they should be doing it. They just like all these things that come into like fashion, and it's just like, okay, why is everyone doing that? So we're going to try and kind of talk to that, some of the benefits, you know, what it is, the different types, yada, yada, yada. If you're a guru yogi and you do loads of yoga, this is probably not necessarily for you, but if you're kind of like getting into it, you want to find out more, this is the place. So let's start with, Eddie, what do you know to be the origins of yoga, or like where's it come from, and how old is the bloody thing?
Thousands of years old, and it dates all the way back to the tantras, which are scriptures from ancient India. And yoga was first discussed in these sacred scriptures around 4,000-5,000 years ago, something that's crazy nuts. Like that. Yeah, it's been a long time. And then there's different, I guess, there's various forms of yoga that date back through different timelines as well. But as far as I'm aware, the earliest teachings of yoga came through the tantras, which is Vedic scriptures.
Wow. So my understanding of like the origins is, I don't understand. I'm going to go and look up a lot of those fancy words that Eddie's just said, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is kind of people just being able to comfortably sit in meditation.
The process of yoga asana, which is the postures that people are familiar with. So when most people think of yoga, they think of stretching. Yeah, right? Stretching is just one part of the tapestry of yoga, and the reason we do asana, we do these postures, is to open our body, our posture, but also the energetic lines inside of us, so we can sit and meditate for longer periods of time.
Right.
So a lot of people who don't necessarily have the bodies of a Western human, which is quite a crumpled, tight, stressed body, generally don't really need yoga asana. So some of the top yogis in India, they don't practice the stretching because they've been sitting on the floor and they've been mobile their whole life. So their yoga practice is steeped in meditation. In fact, we should get into the different forms of yoga, because there are different approaches to yoga. So some approach it through physical, like the asana, some approach it through meditation, some approach it through service, karma yoga, where your yoga journey is based on helping others. So there's various different paths that all interweave. when you start to look into the sort of pathways of yoga.
So that's a really good place to sort of like talk about. So let's talk about your own experience. How did you discover yoga, or how did you get into it?
So yoga was always kind of been in my life. My dad started practicing yoga when I was about 12 or 13. My dad started practicing yoga because he had lots of back problems, and we used to take the piss out of him, me and my brother, because he used to go off for yoga. I grew up in quite a rough area, I guess, looking back on it now, steeped in toxic masculinity, where yoga wasn't the cool thing. Yoga wasn't something that men did. So I remember being young and just taking the piss out of my dad for going to yoga. So that's when I first started to hear about it. Then I got into movement, I got into training, started to hear about it a little bit more. Big into bodybuilding at the time. Wrecked my body, was injured, wasn't feeling good in my body, and I started to have this inkling that I needed to stretch. So that was you
felt quite tight.
Yeah, I was like, I need to stretch, I need to do something. Everyone tells me to do this yoga thing. So I was like, okay. But I had preconceived ideas of what yoga was. I didn't think yoga was for men. I thought it was quite feminine.
I mean, it's predominantly occupied by women in any class you go to. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, because unfortunately, one of the byproducts of strength training is, you get tight, you're contracting muscles. So you do get, that's why you see bodybuilders walking like they're, cowboys.
100%. And I was a cowboy at this point. It's funny because traditionally yoga is a masculine practice as well.
Right, yeah.
So that's interesting as well. That is in the Western world, it's been interpreted as this feminine thing. In India, they used Ashtanga yoga for the guys in the army.
Right.
To keep them
I think strong. Because women have naturally more open hips, because obviously their bodies are designed for childbirth, they find it maybe a little bit more easy to get in certain poses. But, it's really not about like getting into poses, which maybe we'll kind of get on to later. But so what was your entry point into the world of, so continue. So your dad's doing it.
It's in my periphery. I know I need to do it. And there's this yoga studio around the corner from my work. I've told the story quite a few times. I used to walk past and like look through the window going, I need to pluck up the courage and walk in there one day. And it took me about a year because I'm very intimidated because it's full of very bendy women wearing not a lot of clothes. It was Bikram yoga, so hot yoga. So it was intimidating for a guy. Like it was definitely a female-dominated space.
The Lululemon ladies.
Yeah, right. And then one day I plucked up the courage to go in. I did my first 90-minute hot yoga class. I think I practiced some stuff at home on YouTube and stuff, but never been to a proper class.
Right.
And I walked in and fucking hell, I felt amazing afterwards.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. One, that was really fucking hard. I wasn't expecting that.
Your first class, this is, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Sweated out absolute buckets.
So it was hot. It was
hot yoga. Right?
Yeah, Bikram,
yeah.
Hot
it was
called
yoga.
Bikram back then.
Yeah. Now it's called
just hot yoga, isn't it?
Yoga.
Yeah.
And then just had I guess looking back, I think I had a sort of a spiritual experience in that class without even knowing what that was. But anyway, I felt something I'd never felt before.
Yeah.
And that was at the end in Shavasana. We're laying down. I was fidgeting. I didn't know how to be still, but I was trying to be as still as possible. But suddenly I had this feeling come through me that this is what I need to be doing. So I started going every day. I didn't tell anyone. I used to finish work, go do my yoga, come home.
Clandestine yoga.
Literally, I was a closet yogi. And that was my entry. And then the more I went, the better I felt. And then throughout the class, they were dropping all these little gems, these little bits of philosophy that I wasn't even there for. I was there to stretch. I was there for the physical, for my body. And all these little nuggets started to come in through the philosophy. And I was like, there's more to this yoga than just stretching. So I started to study. I started to read about it. And that's when my love for yoga started to evolve. But yeah, that was my entry. The classic yogi.
Yeah, nice.
How about yourself?
So mine was, I didn't have that like moment in the first class. I went with a buddy of mine. We were living in East London and it was all the rage. It was very fashionable. So we were like, let's go to a yoga class. And to be honest, maybe like part of our motives were slightly disingenuous. We were probably like, there'll be loads of women in there and like, I don't know, maybe we were looking for it as a place to like meet women. But we put ourselves at the back in the corner and we just basically were giggling the entire time. We just like how a little we could do this stuff. But it was really good that I had a buddy that I went with. And I was watching these women do these handstands or like headstands and kind of like freely. And I just kept coming back. I don't know what, just kept me coming back. But I think I would leave there and something would have shifted. Something would have just kind of and I just would feel something that I wasn't used to feeling. I mean, I think like a lot of people, I was living a life where I was definitely exposing myself to quite a lot of stress. I had quite a lot of stressful job. This was during a period where I was fairly deep into kind of like being a functioning cocaine addict. So, I think probably the benefit was just being in there and, being in child's pose, for example, for, 20, 30 seconds and closing down the outside world and just kind of centering myself and just kind of I think it was just relaxing for me at that point. And I probably did, notice, maybe some more freedom in terms of how I moved. So let's get into, so I think, that's, one of the ways that it's helped me. What ways do you think it's kind of really helped you in terms of the benefits? You mentioned about, sort of having almost like these moments of kind of like finding, some kind of spirituality, right? Which I think is awesome. I think that's definitely is this unification of spirit, mind, and body, which sounds like really heavy. But is there between those three things you mentioned about posture and things, is there other benefits that it's brought you across those realms, if you like?
So I guess the initial benefits felt were the physical benefits, just feeling more space in my body. But then the awareness that it was creating space in my mind as well. I think that's what I was coming back for. I didn't know, looking back, I didn't know at the time. I just knew I needed to be in that space. But I think it was that relaxing, the stopping, the slowing down that was giving me some sort of insight. And I think the main thing that yoga gave me, whether you're looking at it through a spiritual, physical, or mental aspect, was awareness. So it gave me awareness of my body that made me see where my pains were, where the tightness, where my holding patterns were in my body. So then I could start to give that attention. Then it allowed me to become aware of my mind and what it'd be like. I didn't know what it was like to have a moment of slowing down in my head. I was also a functioning cocaine addict at this time. So there's a lot of parallels between me and Brucey. That's why we're doing this podcast.
That's why bad, mate. That's why bad. You're never getting rid of me.
Yeah. So I was definitely a functioning coke addict at the time. I'm a high drive person. I like to do. It's why when I first started yoga, I remember telling one of my clients at the time that, I've got into yoga and I've got into Bikram yoga. And she was like, of course you're doing the most hardcore. She's like, what you really need is yin. And I was like, fuck that. I need to be doing. So I guess the main thing it's given me, whatever lens you look through it, was awareness. And awareness is something that I think a lot of us are lacking in society today because we're so distracted.
We touched on this in previous pods about the importance of self-awareness. And without self-awareness, you can't take responsibility for the thing that's going on for you that perhaps just needs a bit of attention, maybe needs a bit of change. And I think, that for me, so you mentioned about, being fidgety, I remember, I got ADD, so I find it quite difficult to be still. But I think what was really apparent to me in yoga classes is what was happening in my mind and how and it's quite good because when you have a really good yoga teacher, they draw attention to that. You might in a class, I think this is the thing that people feel quite scared about. And it is quite scary getting to know yourself on a really deep level and how, your mind is just a bit sort of like box of frogs. But, unless you kind of can confront these things and shine a light on them, they're just going to plague you and you can't really do anything about it. And I think one of the good things about yoga is you just become the observer.
100%.
So you just see it and for what is happening and it teaches you to not judge it, but allow it. And it's there. So you can't really do anything about it. What's the point in fighting it? But a good yoga teacher would, I remember yoga teachers saying you might be here and you might be finding, really pleasant experience, or you might be compelled to just want to get out and leave, and if that's the case, do. And I think that's really important that you give people the space that yoga creates is for these things to come out and to express themselves and just to be. And I think for me, there was all this stuff you mentioned about, busyness and doing. I was so busy and doing, and really that is kind of a distraction from what's going on internally.
Yep.
And sort of distracting yourself with the externals. Yeah, so you mentioned yin. I mean, for me, because of my fidgetiness and ADD, it was yin that I really found these profound moments like the one you described when you went to Bikram. And I would come away from a yin class just having experienced this state of bliss. And I know that yin is, yin, my understanding is yin is really about stretching and creating some space in the joints and even like strengthening certain joints, which, by the way, are all things that are going to just help your health span.
Yeah.
So as you get older, your joints, your muscles, your bones can, we've spoken about this on the strength pod, have a propensity to get weaker, but that's not necessarily inevitable. Through movement, through training, you can actually offset these things. There's no reason why you can't have a really healthy functioning body right up until the day where, eventually your heart packs in. So we speak a lot about death on this podcast. Maybe we should call it like learn about your mortality with Bruce and Eddie. I don't think anyone's listening to that. But so I think yin, it is very much about finding space. But I found it also really like restorative. So when I would then go into Shavasana, I would kind of get into this transcendental, it sounds really hippie, where I was kind of asleep, but I was sort of, there is another form of yoga, which is Nidra, which is where they get you into a space sort of in between sleeping and awake. And it's kind of this place. My wife is a teacher of this, and she would probably, talk the hind legs off a donkey about it. But I would find that I would experience that through yin because I just wasn't doing any restorative, restful practices. I was just like eating up whatever. I was all about stimulants and doing stuff and just being busy. And I thought that was the way to live. Yeah. So yin, I think I've found, and we're both yoga teachers, by the way. I don't know if we mentioned that at the beginning. So, we kind of like decided, obviously, through experiencing the benefits to try and give these benefits away to people or share these benefits with people. And I'm very lucky to have taught a number of yin classes. And I see the impact that it has on people. So anyone listening who hasn't done, yoga, it's not just like these, poses and opening the hips. There are also, you could go to a yin class and you could do like 6 poses.
If that.
Yeah. I would highly recommend yin. So do we want to touch on like the other types of yoga, like briefly? Do you want to?
Well, it seems like there's just so many types of yoga now anyway, and there's all of these sort of Western versions of yoga, things like vinyasa and rocket yoga, and there's just so many.
Yoga with puppies,
right? Yeah, it can get overwhelming.
Yeah,
and people don't know where to start, so they just don't do anything.
Yeah,
but if you are getting into yoga, just find a hatha-based class and just start turning up. Yeah, try not to be distracted by all the different forms and styles of yoga that it just stops you from doing anything. Hatha is just probably the most traditional sort of commercial yoga out there that you will find.
And Hatha, for those people who know, you like hold the poses for like, it's about sort of 20, 30 seconds. It's about sort of 5 breaths, maybe a little bit more. So it's slower. And it's very, as you mentioned, it's traditional. So there's very traditional poses, which kind of, by traditional, it means they've, stood the test of time. They're thousands of years old. You're not going to, you're not going to find, there's a reason why they've stood the test of time. And it's going to really serve your body, your mind, and also this, this third element of your spirit, which I don't necessarily want to touch on because I think that's for people just to discover for themselves. And it might sound a bit hoodoo voodoo if we start talking too much about that. Plus, also, I'm not really qualified to talk on that stuff. My understanding really is at the moment the physical and the mental benefits. I'm starting to realise the spiritual benefits, but I think that comes with time.
That's the individual journey as well.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
and that will happen in its own unique way. And I think what scares a lot of people, especially men, about yoga is the language, right? Language you change the language, you change the perspective. So you talked briefly about having these transcendental experiences, or we could talk about having a nervous system reset. I think the language will dictate how it's received, and I do try and stay away from the sort of more the spiritual language and kind of just give matter of fact language instead, because I think that helps people connect with it. Because if you start talking about transcendental experiences and spirituality, some people just go, "Fuck that, that's not for me." And I think that's an important thing to touch on.
For sure, yeah. I think men, maybe any guys listening to this, because we're quite action based. I think for me, I want to be able to move freely. I want to still be able to do all the things that I like and enjoy. And yoga is a really useful tool, for that, to make sure you're still moving freely. You're offsetting maybe some poor posture that might develop, if you're over a laptop or a computer for extended periods of time, which, let's face it, we all are, or your phone, whatever it might be. You can get yourself into better positions to give your missus a better experience, which we've already established is code for. Anyway, I won't go there. So I think this is a really interesting point. Is some people would even argue that yoga is not even exercise, and I think that I would encourage anyone to go into yoga to try not to think of it in any way, shape, or form as like a competitive sport, or a workout, because, and I think this is what stops a lot. You hear this all the time. By the way, if you hear these squawking seagulls, it's because we're in sunny Brighton recording this podcast in my basement for you. So you consider yourselves all very lucky. We're going to go out and enjoy the sun in a bit. But I think for a lot of men, they say, I can't, because I'm not flexible. Yeah. And it's like, okay, but, for a start, stretching is how you then improve your flexibility. But also it's really, I think, just a case of kind of showing up with no expectations and just trying to therefore let go of control and just see what it offers you. And kind of, it is about dissolving the ego. And I think for a lot of guys, like you said, you had a perception of what it was like, that it wasn't necessarily for you. And I think that can stop people from experiencing it. I think probably for me, trying something like Hatha, but also finding a yoga teacher that you just really like, that you feel comfortable with, or, just even it just doesn't piss you off. Because I think when you first go to yoga teachers really piss you off. And that in itself kind of can sort of teach you a little bit about, it's like, because
100%.
You look at they're really irritating because they're so full of peace and love. And it's just well, why does that irritate you? What are you full of if you're not full of peace and love? So it's kind of interesting. It really shows up things in people. I think I also want to touch on, the sort of energy and emotional shifts that it can create. And I didn't really realize this myself about how much emotion and energy is stored in the body, which we're starting to realize. There's an anecdote I have where I was on a juicing retreat, actually, of all things. And there was a yoga teacher there, awesome French, Algerian yoga teacher guy. So I really resonate with it. It's like, wow, there's this guy teaching yoga. That's so cool. And he was just a cool dude. And he said at the beginning of the class, if anybody has an emotional, response, or sort of, just allow it and it's okay. And I, give you permission. And I was sat at the back and I was just like, what is this guy fucking talking about? Who's going to have an emotion? Anyway, I kid you not, 45 minutes into the class, and I just had a breakup and I just started crying. And it was just so cathartic to release that. I hardly ever cry. And it's through those experiences that I've got more in touch with my body, my emotions. And when they come up, I can allow them rather than sort of suppressing them. And I think that's another thing that it can do, not just your emotions, but also your physical body. I know you've talked about this on a previous podcast about listening to the whispers.
Yes.
It can teach you, because it teaches you to be in the body. There's this thing called, proprioception, which is essentially just being aware of, your arms in space attached to your body. So, but, it's kind of connecting with this body that you have and what's going on in it. So you can just start to be aware of, hang on a minute, just something isn't right in my digestive system. Or I think there's an issue in my knee. And you can just start to therefore listen to these things and then respond to them, take action around them before they become,
before
issues.
they start shouting at you, right?
Yeah.
That's what happens. I always say, like, the body whispers before it shouts. And if you're not connected with your body, you're not going to hear the whispers. And eventually he's going to shout at you.
Yeah.
Right. And that's going to be a form of an injury or an illness.
Yeah.
Or an accident, right? To make you stop and take stock. But if you have if you're practicing awareness through, however, yoga could be one of these things you practice awareness through, you're going to build greater intuition, greater connection with your body. And you're going to start to hear these whispers because they're there.
Yeah.
Like, I hear the whispers now and I'm like, okay, right, I can change the oscillators, whether it's my nutrition, whether it's my movement, whether it's my rest and recuperation, whatever it is, I'm able to action the whispers. When back in the day, before I had body awareness, it would be my back's completely gone, right? Tying up my shoes or something, or rolling my ankle when I step off the edge of a curb, because that your body will literally make you stop. If you're not stopping and listening, your body will create something, a disease, an illness, an injury, an accident, to stop you in your tracks. That's really important to notice. And when you start to hear the whispers, it's mind blowing, because you're like, wow, that's been here the whole time. I just haven't been listening. Yeah.
It's good that you mentioned about falling over. In yoga, you do quite a lot of balance. There's like balancing poses, and that's really important for one of the things, unfortunately, as we get older, if you get into your 70s and you have a fall, that's one of the highest incidents of causing death once you get to a certain age, according to Age UK. So, some fairly bleak statistics around my grandmother. She was healthy, had one fall, knocked her head. Within a year, she was dead, 2 strokes. So balance and strengthening the ankles, and this idea of proprioception, where we are in space, is really, really important. We need to pay attention to it. So what else we've mentioned? We've mentioned quite a lot of stuff. Oh yeah, you mentioned about lower, your back going. Yoga, it's really good for like strengthening the core. I don't know whether we mentioned in our strength pod about the different. I think we did different phases of contractions. We did, but we missed out on one, which is isometric. So this is where you're holding the body like a plank. Most
stress position.
A stress position. Yeah. So the muscles are working. There's no movement. There's no lengthening or contracting the muscles, but they're working to hold us. And with yoga, you do a lot of that. And this is going to really help your core. I mean, your core should really be working throughout. It's why people who do yoga regularly, you look at their physiques and, it's pretty impeccable. So, but one of the things relating to, lower back is, strengthening the core, which of course supports your lower back. But you've also got these like weird muscles that I just never knew about, like the psoas muscle, which comes into the lower back. And from getting, when it's tight, that's where it literally pulls, the bottom of your spine. And I think it's sort of attached somewhere into like the hip or something. Yeah. No idea about this muscle until I started doing like Trikonasana, like triangle pose, which, helps to kind of like lengthen that. So, unfortunately our muscles get tight over time. So we do need to move them, the joints as well. But I think also I want to talk about the social and the community aspect, which I know for you is massive.
That was huge. And, that was the changing point for me when I found my yoga community, because the Bikram wasn't the yoga community. It was a very isolated thing. I'd go there by myself. I wouldn't really talk to anyone. No one was really up for talking to anyone either. Everyone was kind of like in their own space. And I wasn't looking for community at the time. I was solely looking for the physical, and that gave me what I wanted. And then I found a yoga studio near where I was living at the time. Turned out the yoga teacher was someone I went to nursery with. He was a friend of mine that I hadn't seen for 20 odd years. But he had built a community there. And I started going every day. And, I'd walk in, there'd be maybe 10, 15 people in each class. Sometimes I'd go twice a day, and you'd hug everyone. So if I went to a 6 a.m. class, before I've started my day, I've hugged 15 people. Right? And at first, it's fucking uncomfortable. Yeah, I wasn't a hugger back then. I wasn't even a smiler back then.
Especially a stranger.
Yeah, completely. But I was very reserved back then, kept my own space. But through being in the community, I learned to smile. I learned to hug people. I learned to hold eye contact. I learned to listen.
Yeah. Show vulnerability. I learned about, other people's lives and support them and to be supported, and all these other aspects that I wasn't looking for suddenly presented themselves. And I think community is a huge
thing that is missing from our lives, especially here in England.
Yeah, for sure.
What's your experience with the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly the same as you've spoken about. Like suddenly going into a place which was just full of love and kindness. You know, I was so used to working in a sales environment or an all-boys school, and it was all macho and it was all front, and nobody really, showed you sort of like much in the way of like love and kindness. And that was really important for me because although I was putting on a brave face inside, I was like this, like we all are, like this helpless child that just wanted, like a hug, So I think, we both have taught a studio here in Brighton, Flow State, shout out Flow State. They've got a wonderful sense of community there, and they draw in people from, different backgrounds and people of different shapes, sizes, colours. And that's really what, it should be about. I think yoga has a bit of a, problem at the moment where maybe it could be a bit more inclusive, but I think it's starting to kind of like getting that. It's identified that is something that, it needs to work on as a community so that it is representative. And I just think it's like, when I go to a yoga studio with other people, I'm there because I know I want to be better in some way. And I think that kind of the fact that I know I have that in common with everyone else in that class is quite touching. It makes me feel quite fuzzy, it makes me feel it's like quite a nice feeling to surround yourself with people like that. I think that also, I wanted to just quickly, we're going to try and wrap this up because we've said to ourselves we're going to do like 20-30 minute episodes, but here we are again, like just coming up to 35 minutes. So I think the other thing just on that is all these things that we've mentioned and we've touched on, for me, it all comes down to this idea of acceptance, kindness, and non-judgment. So, when I go to a yoga studio, I know that maybe I'm going to be confronted with things about myself, like my busy mind, how I get frustrated with myself that I can't be in certain poses, and that something's going on with my body that dissatisfies me. And it kind of teaches me to just allow those things, to treat myself with kindness, and to not necessarily judge those things. Like, I've got this body that can and can't do certain things, and that's everybody. So I kind of, and the fact that I get to teach it to people now, I just see as real gift. And I know that, for you, it's opened you up into new aspects, new worlds and new directions. So anybody listening to this, give it a try, have a good blub, and or don't, just go in with, just like no expectations. Maybe for me, I just want to leave it on, I'm reading this book at the moment, which is about exercise and movement. It's in particular like how it like pertains to like mental health, but I forget who the author is, but she talks about this concept, which is now backed up in science, that the energy that we expend or can waste in like inefficient movement, that energy, if you apply that energy into practices like strength training, into yoga, that energy you get back just in what you gain by being more efficient in terms of your movement. Does that make sense? I've said that in a weird way. And for me, I think that what it's about. Oh, we didn't mention nervous system. Maybe we should actually just like talk about the nervous system and the two different nervous systems and how we can use yoga to move out of like one state to another state. Do you want to?
Well, most of us have heightened nervous systems from the way that we're living, the stress that's put on us, whether it's even a conscious or subconscious, so many subconscious stresses on us, or stresses unknown, just like artificial light and sound and all of these things that are constantly infiltrating us, that a lot of us have a heightened nervous system. We're in the sympathetic nervous system, which causes tension, which causes more stress, inflammation. Disease, we want to try into the parasympathetic as much as possible, where we can relax, where we can restore. And that's often where a lot of aha moments happen, a lot of realizations about your life. I spent 10 years just go. It's not until I gave myself space to stop, and it was in a yoga class, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what am I doing? And I had the space to realize or to think my way out of the situation. And before, I was just like a fucking hamster on the wheel, just going. So it doesn't have to be through yoga. This can be found in nature, which we're going to talk about in another podcast. But finding ways to regulate your nervous system can give you so much life and get you off of the hamster wheel. So seek that out. Rest and recuperation, work, what we call it, working in. You know, it's not a workout, it's a work in. But yoga can definitely be a place for you to explore regulating your nervous system.
That's like, so what literally just happened to me just then is because I've messed up a little bit with the whole, my efficient and energy point, which I made, that really stressed me out. And then when you started just closing out and just talking about that in the press, I just started to breathe, be conscious of my breath. And I just started to elongate the breath and just return out of this sort of fight and flight just into like, okay, just calm down. So you messed up with your words. It's okay. And that's a practice that only yoga's like brought me. You know, we could talk about that as well in terms of the importance of the breath and how that can help you hack your nervous system and bring yourself into the state of rest. You know, yoga will teach you that, will give you introductions into how you can use the breath. So, right, that's a wrap. We're just over 40 minutes. Woo! Right, so we'll see you on the next one where we're going to talk about nutrition. We hope that you've enjoyed this. It's supposed to, be a nice condensed intro and just our observations, our experiences. We really hope that you got something from that, and we'll see you next time.
Big love, guys.